On today's episode, we watch a brave Republican defend the corporate media, talk about how anti-vaccine mandate people are just selfish, delve into the minimum wage once again, see how being scared of seeing people's faces is valid, and lastly, tackle the whole mess of school boards banning books. This is Cringe Posts. Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of the Cringe Post podcast, the show where we're looking through our feeds, we're finding those cringy takes, and we are taking them on, talking about what assumptions they're making, why they're wrong, and debunking them a little bit so that you don't have to. But you're always welcome to as well. So before we get into debunking other people's cringe, we always look at our own cringe. So today we're going to lampoon our co-host Britt here. But before we do that, just a reminder to check out our website if you're listening to the audio version of this, as we have a visual guide to see all the posts that we are taking down if you're not watching it on YouTube or Odyssey. And while you're there, go ahead and leave us a like, a follow, a subscribe, a review. All those good things help us to grow in the algorithm. We appreciate it. But without further delay, let's look at Britt's take here. And it's a series of two tweets 5 days apart. I think that's kind of the key component here. So the first post reads, haha, found an old pair of skinny jeans and tried them on. Clueless as to how I ever fit those. And then 5 days later, we have, all my pants have been ripping as of late. Sad face.
I was telling you about this earlier, but man, like I found my like super old Twitter account from 2009 because I didn't know. I remember I had one, but I didn't know what the handle was or where it was or anything like that. And I just stumbled upon it, and I was like going through, and I literally would like kind of recoil at some of the things I said on there. And so this is probably, to me, the least offensive out of all of them. I'm sure we'll get to a bunch more. I just thought it was funny. It kind of, we did that one post where I was dressed up in the Forever 21 pants, not ironically, seriously. And it reminded me of that. And it's just like, I remember my parents telling me like, dude, you're going to grow out of this, skin tight, skinny jean fad and hair over your eyes fad, and you're going to look back and think it's stupid. And I remember at age 16 or whatever age I was here, like, no way, like, I'll be fine. Like, I think this is cool forever. And here I am on a podcast telling, 100 or 200 people that, no, I was stupid back then.
I just love the cause and effect here. It's just like the 5 days apart is what kills me.
That's, yes.
It makes me think of the comic, the web comic that's been turned into a meme where the guy's like on the bicycle and then, he like sticks the thing between his spokes and like falls over and then he blames something else and you insert any number of things there, but it's just kind of like
jeans that should not be worn by yourself or any man for that matter.
Yeah,
why are my jeans ripped?
Yeah, why are my jeans ripping? It's such an unfortunate way that the world decays around me. No. Oh man, yeah. I think I mentioned I only ever owned one pair of skinny jeans, and it was in high school, and it was because I was part of like a high school, like not a play per se. It was like a mystery dinner kind of thing, interactive event, and we were doing I think 50s or 60s or something. So it was kind of for an outfit, and then I kind of tried to wear them after that, and I was just like, man, this is too uncomfortable. I don't care what else about it, I'm just not going to wear these. And so
yeah.
It was very brief for me. Maybe the
and
same
to be fair,
5 day
to
period.
be fair, any of you folks that see me out in public, I still wear slim jeans. I wear Levi's, slim jeans. But I'm a tall, skinny dude, right? I'm like 6'1" and maybe 170, 175 pounds. So, those technically fit me. I can actually like bend over without them ripping and stuff, and perform work and important tasks. So. just to say, I've moved on from this phase of my life. That's all I'm trying to say.
I was going to say, if only past Brit, even younger than 2011, had the Twitter, we could see the initial tweet that was, got my first pair of skinny jeans.
Oh, we will get into them. We are good. We are good for a long time. I'm telling you, man, we're good for a long time.
All right. Well, I'll move on here. We will talk about someone else, and that someone else is a verified user on Twitter. If you are verified, we do not hide you because you're public enough to put your name out there. So this one comes from Representative Jim Banks, who I believe is a Republican from, I think, Indiana. I could be mistaken, but I believe it's Indiana. And he tweets, "Have we ever seen a president attack and malign the free press like Joe Biden has?" Question mark. And, oh man, there's so many things to say. But before I get into anything else, I will say, yeah, his name was John Adams, and it was called the Sedition Act. But first of all, the context of this, if you're not listening relatively recently, was the big important news for corporate media people that Joe Biden was doing a press conference, and a Fox News reporter named Peter Doocy asked him right at the end, it was just ending, and he asked, tried to sneak in a last question. He said, "Do you think inflation will be a political asset or a political liability in this upcoming election?" Something along those lines. He phrased it in a very stupid way on purpose to try to get the president to be backed into a corner, right? Because obviously no one thinks that inflation is a good thing unless you're, the New York Times trying to justify it or something. But Biden thought his mic was off and said, no, it's going to be an asset in this, election. What a stupid son of a bee. And he said that, and the mic was on, and it caught, and everyone's like, oh.
That's pretty funny, actually.
Well, it's very funny because it's like, yeah, everyone's thought that. I don't know if you've ever listened to like either a press briefing or like a, even just like a speech of a politician. Like you've thought in your head, oh, what an idiot, what a moron. That's. And it's just kind of funny.
Like I kind of like Biden more for that in a weird way.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's like what's cringy about this to me, obviously, is like this Republican just trying to take advantage of this moment. Like, look, he's attacking the free press, and it's like, no, you're absolutely not. And what a funny thing to say. That'd be like Republicans wailing, look, Joe Biden's like cutting the IRS. It's like, yeah, you should. That's like your position, that's the position you should be cheering for anyway. So a lot of cringe here. But then, of course, there's also the people who were, during the Trump years, talking about all this and then being so like, well, of course it's normal to say things like that to dumb questions. And, it's just, there's so many double standards here, but I'll shut up and let you jump in.
Yeah.
Here.
My take. So obviously I don't like Biden more, but like anytime the press gets dunked on, regardless of which side they're on, I think it's hilarious because they're just so dishonest, right? Like that question, right. If it was being asked of someone we were more favorable towards, I'd been like, that's a stupid question. Like, and we would have loved it if someone else had said. So when Biden says that, I still think it's hilarious. But this just reminds me of like, like the kid in school who now has I never went to public school, but based on dozens of movies I've watched, the kid in school who like has been left out his whole life and now he gets to join in on the bullying, and that's like, look, like he's maligning the press, like he's awful. And it's like, dude, like obviously this is such a self-serving like, ooh, now I get to use this baton, and wield it against people that I don't like. Yeah, it's funny. And what hyperbole, right? Like you're bringing up John Adams. It's like, yeah, like if you want to talk about a president that like maligned the press, probably literally, hobbled them and threw them in jail. Like talk about John Adams, and it's disingenuous because like I don't think anyone could say that. Just from face value, Donald Trump did attack and malign the press more than probably any president of our lifetime and set that precedent. So it's like, it's really disingenuous because it's like, it's so clearly not true. Like As much as Joe Biden is dislikable and everything, and that was kind of a nasty thing to say to a person, although hilarious, like you would have a tough point. You'd have a tough job making the point that, Joe Biden's more hostile than Donald Trump was. That's like the core like reason Trump was elected was because he was so hostile to the press. And it was hilarious, man. It's so funny. And kind of to your point about how people were like saying, like they were like dueling takes. I can't remember that Twitter account, but they post a person's past take and then their future take or their present take. And it's like I think Donald Trump literally called a reporter like a stupid bitch. And people were like, that's so awful. Like, when have we ever had a president do this? And then literally the same people that were like saying that stuff about Trump are saying like, no, that was a stupid question. Like, I think this is awesome that he said that. In our case, it's like, it's awesome that they say that no matter what, because it's like, I can't remember, you know that meme where there's the kid, like he's I think he's like starting to like light up a blunt and he sees two girls fighting and he's really excited about it. Like that's how I feel about whenever the press and the president like fight. It's like both of you are awful, and as long as someone gets knocked out, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, so but I can't remember I know what you're talking about with the, you know, the comparing the two takes, and I can't remember who it is, and it's driving me nuts because I saw him reply, and his justification was, I think at least in one of the versions of it, because I think there are multiple times that Trump has called people sons of bees, to be honest, but one of
Defiant
the times
L's, that's the Twitter account.
Yeah, that's the Twitter account that posts it, and at least one of these times, you know, Donald Trump called people who expressed a certain opinion politically sons of bees or something like that.
Yeah.
And that was the justification was, oh, well, at that time he called a bunch of Americans that. This was just calling a single person a son of a bee for a dumb question.
Hey, it lines up with their ideology.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I was like, well, okay, it's this just, I mean, like, yeah, you can always split hairs.
Brian Stelter.
Yeah. It's like you can always you know, split hairs on why the scenarios are not literally the exact same. But the point is that if it's on your team, you're always going to defend it, and if it's not on your team, you're always going to say it's terrible and horrible. But the other thing about it is, it's like, let's remember now, this is just yet another example that politicians are not their, you know, cardboard cutout, what they put in front of you as he's just, you know, folksy Uncle Joe who is like, oh man, that's what was his that's malarkey, you know. That's not what he's thinking in his head. He's thinking that's BS, you know, except he doesn't abbreviate it, obviously. And so you know, it's just like one of those things where it's like, okay, like I think in a weird way, like you said, it makes me, it's like, oh, you actually dropped the guard a little bit. You stopped putting on your fake smile for a second. And you showed you, in fact, are a real human with real feelings and emotions. And in that level, I like you more. In that, oh, I actually saw your guard drop for a second. But that should just remind that, like, everyone is putting on a face. All of these politicians are putting on a face. Don't buy it. It's just, there's just an aura of sliminess about them, regardless. So when you see a moment like this, like, don't clutch your pearls. Don't say, oh, Biden's attacking the press.
No, that's who he actually is.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then maybe, you know, give him some kudos, I suppose. Okay. We will move to our next tweet here. And this one is when people were using the hashtag Australia has fallen due to all of the sort of COVID regime things where they were, you know, physically beating people and forcing them. What are they in, like, their third lockdown or fourth, like, mandatory lockdown or something crazy like that?
In the quarantine camps.
And this was, you know, this was in January. So this is, you know, this is the recent iteration of it. So anyway, this person uses the hashtag to convey a different message. And they tweet, hashtag Australia has fallen victim to the divisive sides of the pandemic. Those who want the pandemic to end, and those who make the entire situation about themselves and their entitlements. And then she posts two memes. I don't really care about one. One is just like the Grim Reaper and like being pushed and stuff. That's stupid. But the one that really got me was someone holding up a sign saying, I believe temporary inconvenience is oppression because I have no idea what real oppression is like. Holy cow. Like, what a blind take. So if you listen to our last episode, one of the things we were talking about was that video from Politics Girl, where she talks about how the Republicans don't want COVID to be over, which is, again, like, I don't think Republicans really are the great, you know, saviors of our time. I don't think they believe in liberty, but they've been reactionary, at least in the Biden days, to say, no, we should open things back up. Again, even if it's not out of a principled position. But to say that they're the ones who want things to remain closed and shut down is, again, you're just gaslighting us at that point. And that's what we have here again, where it's like those who want to make the pandemic end and those who want to make everything about themselves. And it's like, excuse me? The ones who want to make the pandemic end are the ones who are making it everything about themselves, because they're the ones telling you that you can't live your life because of my rules, because you might put me at risk if I'm in public. But so you have to stay at home. It's not the, you know, your own calculation of like, I don't want to risk it, so I'm not going to go out in public. Absolute backwards take. And of course, I believe in temporary inconvenience is oppression. These people were literally locked in their homes. They were being physically beaten because they wanted to get out of their own house. That's insane to me.
Yeah, it's really crazy how much these people have flipped in the past few months. Like once they started sensing the fear of COVID-19 doesn't work anymore, and the winds have kind of shifted, and people are like, "Hey, wait, I'm sick of this." And everything that everyone did to lock us down and make me miserable didn't help anything at all. And there's no limiting principle, so it's just going to continue on unless I say something about it. All these people start flipping like, no, we actually want these things to end. It's like, no, you don't. You've loved every minute of this being here and you having the power to go yell at whoever you want because they're not wearing a mask that you want them to wear. I was talking with someone yesterday. And I was remembering back in April of 2020, and this was before any of the mask mandates had been handed down here in Washington State. And I was out at Target, and we bought some stuff at the self-checkout line, and someone had accidentally left behind a bag of stuff in the checkout line. And so we picked it up and gave it to the Target cashier and said, "Hey, I think someone left it here. It looks like they paid for it, but they left it." And the person that left it came into the store. She was wearing a mask. She's literally a Karen, and she and my wife was like, "Hey, like here's the stuff." Like I handed it to them over there, and she freaked out at us. She's like, "What do you mean? You touched my stuff? You're not even wearing a mask. Like, did you sanitize?" It's like, lady,
no way.
Yeah, I'm not joking, man. And I'm like, lady, like we touched it. And so did everyone else that touched it to get it here, from the supply chain to people stocking on the shelves. Yeah. And what was crazy was that she was in the minority, right? There was one of her and everyone else was not wearing masks and no one gave a rip about what was going on. And I just wish that I could go back and tell myself, like, you better get used to this because there's going to be a lot more of these people out and about. Yeah. And for these, this person on Twitter to pretend, right, that like, that she's always wanted it to end this entire time. It's like, no, like you've been the cause of this and you've been the one that's perpetuated it. And how dare you compare people losing their livelihoods, people being locked in their houses, people being handcuffed and led away from places that they have every right to visit, or people in Australia literally being forced into quarantine with barbed wire fences where people want to escape because it's so, they're being locked up. How dare you say that's not oppression? Like, I get it. You're not being shoved in a concentration camp and being, shot or gassed and thrown into a pit. But, as we know and we've seen on the show, there's a lot of you that advocate for that. So, I mean, this is like crazy amounts of gaslighting. And what's really terrifying to me about it, too, is like, it's almost like these people aren't aware that they flipped. Like, they're like NPC mode. Like, well, this is what my rulers are saying, so I'm going to repeat it, or this is what I have to say to make the past 2 years that I, of actions that I've enforced on everyone make sense. So this is what I'm going to say. It really is a mind virus, dude. I know they all make fun of the mass formation psychosis stuff, but like this is like huge. Like regardless of what you call it, like a psychosis has taken over people, right? And they're saying crazy things and not living in reality.
Yeah, I just think that it's like, in a place like where we live, where you might have to show your papers, please, in certain places, right? Or have to wear a mask. Like, to me, that's not oppression in the outright sense. That's not the word I would use to describe it. I would say it's authoritarian. I would say it's on the path to oppression. And I would put it at more than temporary inconvenience, right? It's definitely a threshold above that because you are literally creating a second-class citizen out of people who don't want to inject something in their body. So that's not a temporary inconvenience to diminish it like that. But the crazy thing to me is that this person is not talking about the US. They're talking about Australia, where there have been these cases of putting people in forced quarantine. And you have situations like that where it's like, even if that's not your threshold for oppression, which is such a low bar to be called oppression, but even if that isn't, do you not think that that's what leads to things that enable oppression? Do you not think that that is the path that all of these different historical examples get started on? And to not go back to our classic German example, since that one apparently will get you labeled as a Jew hater, let's look at one closer to home. And let's just posit the question to this person. Do you think that the interning of the Japanese was a temporary inconvenience or oppression? Just want to know, where on that scale does it fit? Because Australia seems closer to that than they do to free. So best case scenario for you, they have a very, very, very high level of temporary inconvenience. And I just think calling something as horrible as forced quarantine like that, and again, physically being assaulted for trying to live your life, I think that's pretty safe to call oppression. And I think saying that it's a temporary inconvenience, or calling what the Japanese went through a temporary inconvenience, it's pretty disgusting. And it shows you're either so detached from that reality that you don't know what you're saying, or you're so married to your own ideology that you'll say anything to get your point across because you just want to win and have control.
The thing about the difference between temporary inconvenience and oppression, like I guess you could say, like, they're kind of emotionally charged words in a way, but like at least the oppression side of it is. But like I guess inconvenience is like, oh, like something happened, like it could be just reality. Like I got a flat tire, right? And now I have to wait for 3 hours on the side of the road for a tow truck to come. Something I don't have control over, and usually someone else doesn't really have control over. It just happened. Oppression is when someone actively comes and tries to do something to hurt you or to make things awful for you. And what does that sound like? I mean, that's kind of sounds like Justin Trudeau or Daniel Andrews or any of these Australian or Canadian politicians saying, we need to make life miserable for the unvaccinated. That sounds like oppression to me. It might not be the oppression on the scale of Nazi Germany or some crazy genocide, but your point is very great that it is pretty close to the oppression of, oh, for everyone's safety, we need to intern these Japanese Americans in camps until the war is over.
Just temporarily.
Temporarily for, until the war's over, for a better part of a decade, we're going to do that. It's just temporary. Hopefully it's not that way for this. Hopefully it's over here soon. But regardless, who has the right to take away a year of a person's life for a personal decision? No one.
Completely agree. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. And now this one is a meme, and the words itself is like, not it's kind of the how should I say? Sort of the vibe that is being given off that is the mockery of this position. So, you'll have to understand when I read the words and kind of get the feeling of it. So, the picture, it is kind of a funny picture, and there have been different, memes made of it, but it's from behind. It shows on a bench, characters very clearly resembling Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny, and they're passing back and forth a blunt, indicating they're both high. And then Mickey Mouse says, "Man, I wish we made more than $7.25 an hour." And then Bugs Bunny saying, "Yeah, but then the Big Mac would be more expensive." So again, it's kind of mocking the position of people who don't want a minimum wage or don't want to raise the minimum wage by saying, sort of like depicting these sort of dude bro. I mean, it's obviously, again, humor because it's Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny, but sort of this dude bro, we're high, like think we're really insightful. And yeah, but the Big Mac would be more expensive, like as if the comparison is their quality of life increases, but then the Big Mac gets more expensive, right? That's kind of the idea it's mocking. And I wanted to bring this up earlier, but I wanted to save it for this post because I thought of it specifically when I was driving into work the other day. So whenever I love sleep, I hate waking up early, but when I go into the office, sometimes I'll sleep in. I have to get up kind of early, so sometimes I'll sleep in and I'll get up and I'm like, man, I don't have time to make lunch, right? And being as cheap as I am, I will find the absolute lowest cost way to feed myself when I'm at work because I'm like, I didn't have time to make myself a lunch, which would be the lowest cost. So I'm not going to, go out and spend like $12 on fast food. I'm going to spend like, if I can get away with it, $4 on fast food, right? So I'm a fiend for deals. And right across from my office is Burger King. So, the quality of Burger King is pretty low in terms of fast food. Like, I'm not picky, so I'll eat there, but it's not great. But they have really, really good deals. That's just kind of why I would pick them. They for the longest time, have this deal that was $1.50, and you get 10 nuggets for like $1.50, which is a pretty good deal.
That's a good deal.
And you can even do they have like some app deals that are like $4 for a burger, some nuggets, small fries, and a drink. Like $4, like that's a really good deal. But what struck me was when I was driving into work earlier this year, so in January, I looked at the sign. I wasn't going in, but I looked at the sign and it was like $149, 8-piece nugget. So nothing had changed. There was no particular, I mean, there were laws that took effect, like really stupid laws on restaurants that require you to ask them to provide you with cutlery and napkins and stuff now, which is so dumb. But that's not necessarily a cost increasing factor for them. So there wasn't any specific legislation that would affect them. As far as I know, Burger King's bottom line hadn't been seriously impacted by any food outage. Or what happened, of course, was the slow creeping of things like inflation, the slow creeping things like the minimum wage, which every year, depending on your size, is going up in Washington State. It was sort of on this graduated schedule. And so what struck me is that regardless of the cost, people will recognize that you raise the minimum wage and costs increase, but they say that things offset that. But the bottom line is that through no fault of anyone else's own, they get less for their $1.50 than they did before. And again, the people who often are the ones at the top advocating for minimum wage increases, they don't care. You think Bernie Sanders even knows the price of what a Burger King burger costs? Absolutely not. He's eating fine. But he's advocating for this kind of thing because it does not impact him at all. It just wins him points. And the people it hurts are the ones who now literally get 20% less food than they did for the exact same cost.
That's funny you're saying that. So I was thinking about this face lotion, moisturizer stuff that I get. It's like $5 or something like that. And it normally comes in this really nice big round thing. And I went to the grocery store to grab some because I grab it like twice a year because that's how long it lasts me. And it's still $5, but they cut the whole volume of it in half. So I'm now paying literally double for, I'm paying double for face lotion. Yeah, the cost, I'm not paying $10, but I'm paying $5 for half as much. And that's the problem with a lot of these types of posts is like people look at economics and they look at wages and they look at products through like a single variate analysis. It's like, well, $7.25 an hour, and then the Big Mac is not a bit more expensive, right? Like they talk about like with Dick's Burgers or whatever here in Seattle, like things haven't really increased in price, or like a bag of chips or whatever. But it's like, no, you got to have a multivariate analysis of how all this stuff works. It's like one way that they make sure that they do this stuff is that they shrink the actual amount of products. So because surprise, surprise, businesses need to make enough money to cover their cost and make a profit. If you don't make a profit, as we've said a zillion times on this show, if you're not growing, you are literally dying because profit is literally the lifeblood of a business. It made me think about and this is the part that they always miss. It's like, when do you think that wages didn't really start to keep up with, rising prices? And it's like, surprise, surprise, in the 1970s, what happened in the 1970s financially? That's kind of crazy. Well, we got taken off the gold standard. And that's just, they don't have a clear understanding of like value and like what work actually is, right? Like it's like if you want to make money or you have to provide something that people want to buy, and you have to provide it at a cost that they're willing to pay and that they feel like they're getting value. And so it's like if someone's not going to pay $15 for like a 10-piece chicken nugget, right? But that's the cost of it, to provide a 10-piece chicken nugget, but people are only willing to pay $1 for it. It's like, well, shoot, I better only give one nugget and then I can give it for $1. I shouldn't use the same example and things, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Go. Oh, I was just going to say, just to add to the example, it's like, places like Costco, they have a food court in there, and they are very adamant about not raising their prices, and the food court loses them money, and they offset it by the other shopping that people do there through memberships and then buying the products and things like that, because the food court is a selling point. But so there's a very famous story where they're talking about, I think, with minimum wage raises, there we go, and other factors, how, well, if we wanted to keep it profitable or something, we have to raise the price of their very classic hot dog and a drink for $1.50. And the CEOs, I believe, or someone high up there said something like, if you change the price of the hot dog, like, I will effing kill you, or something like that. Like, he was very adamant about that $1.50 price point. But So they've started losing money, but they realize it's worth it to bring people in.
It's a profit motive. There's still profit motive involved in that decision.
That's exactly right. The problem is that the restaurant is not independently run. So the costs are offset elsewhere. But then the crazy thing is that then other effects impact it. So like the soda tax that hit Seattle. So the byproduct of that is that now none of the soda that you can get in the food court there has sugar, because this sugar soda gets taxed. So it's all diet. So they keep the price at $1.50, but you cannot get a good tasting soda because diet soda is nasty. Sorry if you like it. It's just gross. I don't drink soda because I'm trying to be healthy. I drink it because it tastes good, and give me that sugar, right? But yeah, so it's just another example. Again, that's not necessarily directly related to the minimum wage increase, although I'm sure that plays some factor into it, but mostly about just the sort of unintended consequences and the ways that even if the technical price point hasn't changed, you do pay for it in other ways, and the value is shifted elsewhere. And like you said, there's profit motive, which is to drive people to come into the other parts of the business where they are making back that value.
People, like, a lot of people don't know things like what a loss leader is, right? It's like grocery stores sell milk and eggs and things like that at a loss because they want to have the bare necessities at a really competitive price so that you come into the store, and as you're checking out or whatever, and have you ever wondered why milk and eggs are at the back of the store, even though they're the most commonly bought things when you go to the grocery store? It's because they want you to walk through the whole thing so that you grab other stuff that you need on the way out that they actually make a profit on. It's funny you mentioned the soda tax, because it's like for a lot of restaurants, the most amount of money that they make is actually on like drinks and things like that. And that's kind of my last point on this one is like the demonization of the profit motive, right? And that kind of ties into this. Well, the only reason we can't pay $20 an hour to people is because businesses are greedy and they want to make a profit. It's like wrong. Like right in that they want to make a profit, but wrong in that they could ever not make a profit. You don't have a business if you don't make a profit. It just doesn't exist. And it's wrong to think that like to make a profit is to be a good steward of a business, right? And that's what people don't understand. It's like you are running your business poorly. You're doing everyone an injustice if you don't make a profit, because that means you are not doing things with excellence or doing it in the most efficient way. And that's what they don't get. Is it, kind of to your example, when there's no profit motive, or if you strip away the profit motive, the amount of options that a consumer can have shrink, and then the amount of price that they have to pay for the limited amount of options skyrockets, and everyone is unhappy and unemployed.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. I think you're right there. So I think we'll move on.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, great. And so this one comes from Twitter, and the first one is a quote retweet, and it's kind of in a conversation. This person is asking a question that he sees on sort of this meeting protocol invite that he's on, or that he's looking at, or something like that. And so this guy asks, masks required for a Zoom meeting, is that correct? And this person quote tweets that with the reply, correct. Fear of unmasked faces, parentheses FUF, can be caused by anything from loss of loved ones to COVID to frightening encounters with unmasked maggots.
Oh.
This is why it is basic courtesy to avoid showing full face on video conference calls.
Oh my gosh.
It feels like we are beyond parody at this point, right? Right?
She's got a PhD though, dude. She must be right.
Yeah. This user has a PhD. And so I think in this day and age, having a PhD means that you get to make up any kind of condition you want to suit the narrative. Because that way you can sort of solidify your spot in academia. Well, I researched FUF. It has an abbreviation, so it's pretty official. Yeah, fuff. I think that's a pretty good descriptor of it too. Just a lot of fuff there. I mean, we were literally, like at the beginning of this pandemic, we were literally making fun of people wearing masks on Zoom calls. Like that was a punchline by people, regardless of your fear of COVID. It wasn't just like the right making. The right probably was more had the propensity to do it more. But generally speaking, it was just kind of a funny joke, like, oh, we have to wear masks on this Zoom call, right? Ha ha. Sort of unfunny corporate humor as it goes. And now this is literally being proposed as serious for psychological reasons. And that is just wild to me. It's like, one, if this were a real thing, that is a terrible sign for our population, that we are so fragile in our ego, or excuse me, in our mentality, that seeing another person's full face breaks you. Like, that is legitimately terrifying if that is the actual reality. Or two, more likely, this just is another way that people are trying to normalize the control and the edicts from government, because it's like, oh man, you have to wear masks in public. Well, if you have the freedom to work from home, you're not going to want to do that in public. And we need to make sure that our iron grip is still on you, so that it's just courtesy. It's just a temporary inconvenience. It's just the right thing to do, to not offend anyone in any way, shape, or form. Someone could be scared of your face, so you better not cover, or you better cover most of it up. Like, what a wild take.
Yeah, it's almost as if the authoritarian government we've got in place, like, the way they exert control over people is they make people believe, oh, I've got this shiny button in front of me, and it's the make everyone safe button, and if you elect me, I'll make sure I push that button, and then everything will be safe. And for them to uphold that narrative requires for people to not critically think. And for people to not critically think, like, when people critically think about things like, why are you wearing a mask in a Zoom call? Like, they can't let that happen, right? Because if you critically think about that, you might start thinking, oh, like, if I wear a mask out in public and this doesn't actually block particles, a cloth mask doesn't block particles that carry COVID, like, why are we even wearing this? And if they're going to question wearing the mask out in public, that the big bureaucracy said, I've pushed the button and makes you safe, then they might start questioning everything about their authority. And so they can't let that happen. So this is either a really mentally sick individual, right? Which is all the more reason that, like, I don't know, the amount of people dying from COVID versus a complete generation of 100 million people that can't bear to look at another person's face, you kind of got to weigh that. And I'd say, it might be okay for us to ease up restrictions just for the sake of, future people being able to look at each other. That's pretty important. So that's pretty crazy that she would say that. And then, or two, she's just towing the narrative because it's like, well, we have to have adherence to the authoritarians, or else we're going to lose grip, like you were saying. The other thing, and the last part I have on this one that kind of freaks me out, was when she called people that don't wear masks maggots, like, obviously abbreviating the mega, but like, she's clearly inferring like, hey, you're a maggot. It's like, whoa, like, where else in history? I know it's really unpopular, not cool, to infer correlations between today and stuff that was happening in 1940s Germany, but man, calling people animals or pestilence or disease or bugs, that sounds pretty similar to a lot of different awful things that have happened in history, and especially if you're going to call someone a maggot, like, that's just, what an ugly thing to do. Well, if Joe Biden said that to a reporter, I would laugh, but in this instance, I don't, because they're talking about a lot of different people that are good people. Well,
I was going to say it's not even just like classifying people as maggots. I mean, that is pretty ugly, but it's like, it's classifying these people as maggots for being in the natural state of things.
Yeah.
It's for them just existing, like, without like complying with this edict that you have to mask up or cover your face. I mean, to me, that almost strikes me as like similar to sort of the idea of like the very, very, I don't know, I don't know. I don't like these depictions, but like the very high and mighty clergy looking at someone like a girl wearing shorts or something and being like, what a whore, sort of making this judgment on someone for not complying to a very, very strict interpretation of what they deem as the right rules, right? There's no like any sort of discernment in this kind of a call. It's like, you're an unmasked person, you're a maggot kind of a thing, which is just gross. And to me, it's just kind of like, you are now the ones policing the way that people dress and the way that people are.
Yeah.
Which you criticized heavily in the past. So it's kind of weird.
I'm sorry. I know I've said it was the last thing, but I do have one more on it.
Please go. Yeah.
The thing she says at the end, she says, this is why it is basic courtesy to avoid showing full face on video conference calls because of fear of unmasked faces. It's like, no psychologist or therapist worth their salt is going to say, hey, if you've got this phobia or you've got PTSD or you've got some crazy, fear that you've got in your life that it induces an involuntary reaction from yourself, none of them are going to say, hey, you got to keep isolating yourself from that fear. Like, the only way to actually overcome some of these things is by voluntary confrontation of them, because that builds up courage. It builds up the ability to stand in the presence of that fear. And so it just speaks to the unhealthy mindset that a lot of these people have. Like, if this person is being genuine, they're not just towing the line for authoritarian, sake. Like, it just shows like this person views any sort of resistance or stress as something to run away from, as opposed to something to face and overcome. And that's why I think in the end we're going to win, right? Because it's like we're continuously coming up against people that are just becoming more and more weak from their mindset, and that's sad. But I hope that at some point this person turns their life around and is able, because I bet this person has tons of other mental issues as well, right? You can't live in a mindset of running away from your fears and isolating and living in a room full of walls filled with pillows that you can't get hurt on without having a really healthy mind. And I hope she gets better.
Yeah, well, and what I would say is, like, even when you're not supposed to head on, like, you're supposed to have a little bit of exposure and then take a rest, kind of a thing, right? Like, let's say
Sure.
you're suffering from exhaustion. It's like, well, let's go on a small walk, and maybe you're not even able to do a full walk to your car, but let's just go halfway, come back, and then rest. You don't ask the rest of society to shape their
Yes.
preferences around you. This is going back to sort of that idea where people who want things to go back to normal and, like, not have to wear masks are the ones being called selfish, when really it's these authoritarian edicts. So it's like, if this is real, again, best case scenario, and if this is something that actually triggers someone in that, one, you're right, you're not gonna get out better from running away from it your whole life. So let's say you can only do one, like, 10-minute session before you start breaking down. Then maybe you work as an individual with your company, be like, hey, is it okay if I just join these on audio? If I call in from my phone, Zoom has that capability, right? Then you don't have to see anyone else's face, and you can talk like normal, and no one has to cover half of their face on a Zoom call, right? That's an entirely optional thing for you to be able to do to change your circumstance and your reality, so that not every other person there is accommodating for yours. And again, that's best case scenario, assuming this is completely real. So, yeah. All right.
Be on the lookout for Fuff.
Yeah. Moving on from that Fuff. Okay, this last one is a little bit of a doozy to explain, so I'm going to try to sort of break down the scenario, and it's not exactly like a singular post. It's kind of a whole scenario, but I grabbed a post I thought was cringy in light of it. So I'm going to start by, this is the whole nonsense with the Tennessee county, one of the county school boards changed out the book Maus. And if you're not familiar with the book Maus, as a quick descriptor, it is a comic book styled story of the author talking to his father about his time in the internment camps in Germany, because his family was from Poland. They were Jews, and it's the escape of, or sort of the story of his family, the ones who survived, those who didn't, being in those internment camps, and his father's eventual escape. And as such, it's depicted in, like I said, a comic book style. The Jews are depicted as mice. The Nazis are cats. I think the Americans are dogs, usually. Stuff like that. Like, it uses these, sort of like animals to display things. But obviously, the topic matter is very sensitive. And the deeper you go into these books, there's Maus 1 and 2, the more graphic it gets. There's some harsh language. There's depiction of grotesque things, and they become more human the deeper you go in. By one page, you literally just see a human face behind things, and then it kind of goes back to the animals, because it's just gripping. It's very a really good read. Highly recommend it. But the first sort of cringy thing about the scenario is that this school board, I read through their meeting minutes, not all of it, but I skimmed through it, and they were concerned about the language and the fact that there was a picture of a nude woman, again, a mouse, and it was not done in a sexual manner. It was done in a way because her body was there, right? Because of the internment camps. And so they wanted to swap this book out because they thought it was they didn't want their 8th grader class to see that kind of mature content at that time. So the way that it got reported, going to this actual post, was Judd, I think it's Legume, maybe it's Legum, I don't know, I've only ever read his name, but he tweets, the McMinn County School Board in Tennessee just voted to ban a Pulitzer Prize-winning graphic novel about the Holocaust. The vote was 10-0. And then Representative Steve Cohen from Tennessee tweets, Nearly 100 years since a teacher was prosecuted in the Scopes trial for teaching evolution, the neighboring county bans a book about the Holocaust. The Holocaust should never be forgotten, and children can learn easier from a Pulitzer Prize-winning comic book than anything else. Okay, so, again, I've already given you so much, sort of background info, but let's talk about this a little bit. One, extremely cringy that they're saying they banned the book. They did not ban the book. They're looking to swap it out. And in the minutes, they even say, if we cannot find a suitable replacement, we can go back to this book. A ban means that it cannot be on the premise. It would be confiscated if found by any of the schoolers. This means they wanted to swap it out of the curriculum. Two, no, it's cringy that they're swapping this out. Like, I get that there are mature themes in Maus, but I think 8th graders could handle it. Maybe not, but honestly, like, it is a very, very good book. 3, real censorship exists, and it's called you scrubbing the internet of any COVID-related, info that you don't like, including scientific studies and Twitter accounts, including people who, literally created the mRNA vaccine, foundations. Those people are being actually censored, and yet you're talking about a book being swapped out as being banned. No, that's cringy. Then this guy, Steve Cohen, makes the comparison to the Scopes trial, which was, for one thing, the Scopes trial was very much a setup case. Like, they were like, hey, do you want to say that you were teaching evolution so we can take this to court? And the guy's like, well, I don't teach biology, but sure, my physics kind of involves the idea of evolution, so yeah. And in the Scopes trial, it was a whole concept that was being banned, not a specific book. And book bans are cringy. This is swapping out a book. They weren't saying, like, in the Scopes trial, you can't use this book to teach evolution, but you can teach other evolutions. It was, you cannot teach the concept of evolution. Huge difference. And lastly, I've got a billion other things, but, like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't make it illegal to, and have the government being so much in control of this kind of education, what you can and can't teach. Okay. I'll hit on more things in a second. Britt, go ahead with your thoughts.
Yeah. I've never read Maus, so I don't know much about it. And honestly, I was like, I see your point, and I agree with it. Because when I first saw this, I was like, I don't get it. Like, it's cringy to ban the book if that's what they did, and it's also cringy to get get your panties in a wad about it. Like, just leave people alone. On both sides, just leave them all alone. The thing about, like, and you've kind of mentioned a little bit, but, like, public school is just so interesting. It's like, just let parents decide what their kids can and can't read, and all that. And I get it. Like, if you're planning a curriculum, like, maybe at the classroom level, and parent level, this is where it should be decided. It's like, hey, if my kid's in this class, like, all the parents can get together and decide if they want to have this in it or not. And then if I don't want my kid to, if it's important enough to me to have my kid not read Maus, then I'm going to pull him out. Like, that's like how, a functioning society and relationship works, right? Like, to quote Michael Malice, like, anarchy is not a place, it's a relationship. And the relationship is, if you want me to do something I don't want to do, then I have every option to leave and not do it, right? And so it's just so interesting, too, to me that the same people who are calling for, like, being angry at the school board for banning or swapping out this book and making a mountain out of a molehill, are people that literally cancel over, like, the smallest of content, in anything, whether it's in culture and media, if someone makes some sort of joke, not even in the movie that they're featured in. Like, I think about, like, Kevin Hart, made a joke decades ago, and then he's canceled from hosting the Oscars, right? So, like, these people, like, will do this for everything, not just books, but culture, media, entertainment. Even people that are, like, if you're a CEO at T-Mobile, and I don't think he was a CEO, like a C-level executive at T-Mobile, and you give to a pro-life organization, like, that was enough for him to get, fired from his position at T-Mobile. And so it's like, okay, like, why can't we just leave everyone alone? Like, if people want to read the book, let them read the book. If they're not going to read the book, don't read the book. And just let people and school districts or parents or whoever make their own decisions. And, I don't know, man. You talking about the book was pretty interesting, so I actually probably will grab it and read it myself at some point because it sounds interesting.
So I didn't read it until college. I read it in an advanced nonfiction course by Dr. Jeremiah Webster. Great class, great teacher. And it was very mature. It moved me, but it was very compelling. And so to me, I think like a good teacher using this in the 8th grade really could get, sort of like level up his students in a sense, right? To care about this on a deeper, more engaging level. So I get that point. But even if they do swap out the book, the whole point is they're swapping it out. They're not removing the Holocaust as a teaching point in the curriculum, right? So like the whole Scopes trial comparison is so cringe to me. It's like, oh my gosh. But yeah, and one point that you made that was great was like, in any part of functioning society, it's like, you don't want to do something or you don't want your kid to go through something. All right, you pull it out, you take it somewhere else, you take your business elsewhere. But of course, the public school education doesn't make that possible, right? It's like even if you wanted to switch to a different public school, you can't. You're zip locked in, which is, part of a racist past of trying to segregate schools. And it's still a hallmark feature that, public school teachers unions don't want to abolish. They also don't want you to be able to take your money elsewhere to other alternative school options. And so you're really, unless you can afford to pay on your own, you're really locked into that public school that gets to decide whether or not from you as a parent, they're teaching you a book that you think is inappropriate for your kid, or they're censoring or swapping out a book that you think would be very beneficial for your kid. So either way, you're screwed, right? And one of the other things that I saw that was really funny was that there were in the light of this, there were posts about how Mouse was now sold out in a bunch of different stores. It's sold out on Amazon. You can get it in other places right now. But online people are buying it because they're like, oh, I want to be able to have this and stuff like that. I already own my copies, so I'm already set. But all these people being like, oh, I was hoping this would happen. You really can't censor information like that. You can't try to ban books without them getting out there. Censorship doesn't work. And I'm like, for the 500 bazillionth time, this school board is not trying to ban a book. 2, even if they were, which I think would be stupid, they're not trying to ban the book from you reading it, right? They're trying to ban 8th graders from reading it, I guess, because they don't think they're ready for it. Or at least they don't think that they're mature enough to teach it to those 8th graders, right? Or like they don't have the ability to. But it's like they're not trying to scrub it from the internet. And then 3, again, with all of the censoring that they do on COVID information and stuff like that, it's like apply that same logic there. When you try to take down people, or you are like, good, I'm glad Donald Trump got censored on Twitter. It's like, okay, now do you think his content will come out elsewhere? Do you think he gains more notoriety from that fact? Do you think that I'm now more sympathetic to him because you're trying to silence him and shut him up? Which it's like, wow. He could be a babbling idiot, or he could actually have something that threatens them a little bit. I think he's a babbling idiot, but he still threatens them anyway, and it's like,
yeah.
So they take this principle only in the cases they want it, in this very narrowly and wrongly applied example, and then they just ignore it, bury their head in the sand when it comes to anything else.
Yeah, this reminds me a little bit of the very first cringe post we did from someone else on this episode, Jim Banks. Because it's like, this is almost like a cry for like, hey, look, they're censoring us too, you know? Like, and they're like, well, this, if they kind of do the mental gymnastics, like, well, swapping and banning could kind of be the same thing, they're removing the book, so that's the same as banning. And they're just like, they're desperate, right? And both sides do this, as we saw with Jim Banks, both sides are desperate to wield cultural power to beat into submission, the people that they don't like. And I think that's what when you like analyze what makes something cringe, because it's funny, like something's cringe when you see it, but like if you really like dive into it, it's someone's inorganic reaction or take on something that has a clear agenda behind it, right? Like it's not what they actually think. They don't actually have a conviction about it. It's just that they, either in their ignorance or in their malice, they are trying to make a certain point or make a certain agenda come to fruition. And it's like this person's like, obviously their whole agenda is like, look, like the right gets censored, but look at us, they're banning books. Like, that reminds me of I saw in the comments on this, like, this reminds me of Nazi Germany when they would have the book burning sessions. It's like, oh, yeah, you could get it on Amazon, dude. Like, chill out.
Wait. Is that a Jew hater? Because they made a comparison to Nazi, Germany. So
yeah.
I think some people got called that before. So
cancel them like Gina Carano, dude. Like, that's what needs to happen.
Yep. Well, I think the last little, not even full point I'll make is that it's like, to me, this is like if someone said, you know what, I used to listen to cringe posts, but nowadays I don't so much. I just stick more to Tom Woods. I'd be like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that they are trying to censor cringe posts from the internet. It's like, no, he just doesn't want to listen to it anymore. It's like that particular school doesn't want to use it. fine. Like it's dumb. It's a good way. They're still teaching it. It's like me saying, "Oh man, you've rejected podcasts altogether because you don't listen to Cringe Post." Like, no, I still listen to other podcasts. Like, they still teach on the Holocaust. It's bunk. But obviously, in this case, I think Mouse is the best way to teach about the Holocaust, and listening to Cringe Posts is the best way to listen to podcasts. So, very apt comparison there. All right. Well, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening and sticking with us. We greatly appreciate it. Any sort of comments you've got for us, if we said something that made you cringe, or if you wanted to add your own thoughts to the cringes we had here, we'd love to hear them. You can email us at cringepostspod@gmail.com. Leave a comment on the video or anything like that, and we will definitely get back to you. We appreciate that kind of interaction. So please and keep on listening and enjoying, and we're going to keep making content for you. So we'll see you on the next one.